Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, how you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. Second time lucky for everyone that's watched the Vecino and DePaul transfer rumor mill. I kept referencing this video that we talked about where we debated the Ross Barkley signing, and you're not going crazy. It's not like you couldn't just find it. It's that my Zoom didn't record it right. It was only showing whoever was speaking, and we know that you guys like to see both of our pretty faces at the same time, regardless of who is speaking. And we couldn't give you guys that. So here we are, second time around. I'm delighted to be with you again, mate. And yeah, let's hope it goes a bit smoother this time.
Absolutely. We thought as well we'd give it a few days just so as it didn't feel like we were just regurgitating what is essentially the same podcast. We wanted the conversation to feel natural. So as always, we're back again with another podcast. Slight twist on the general transfer rumor mills that we've been doing recently, Dan. But before we do get into it, again, as you referenced the Vecino and DePaul transfer rumor mill, I'd just like to give a massive shout out to everybody who has watched that, who's commented. A whole bunch of really nice comments on there and some really good feedback, which is really good. Didn't expect the video to do as well because they're two players that people may not have known as much about, but absolutely buzzing that all of you guys seem to enjoy that. So I'd just like to say thank you before we get into the podcast. Another thing as well, I think there was a few people in the comments that maybe didn't hear when we mentioned it, Dan, but some players that we talk about in transfer rumor that aren't always going to be solid links. There's generally one player who we've been linked with, who we speak about, and another, the second player who we generally talk about last is a kind of dream kind of transfer that either Dan or I comes up with and we speak about and explain why they'd fit. So there was a few people asking about the DePaul. Obviously, again, just to reiterate, if you've probably already seen that, there aren't any links with Rodrigo DePaul. There were some tentative ones in the summer, but there's been nothing since. I don't expect us to sign DePaul, but just to get that out of the way now for you guys. Before we go into this one now, of course, as you guys have seen from the title, you've heard Dan and I go on about this fabled podcast in the last podcast. We are talking about the contract situation at Aston Villa, Dan, and two players in particular, Ezri Konsa and Douglas Luiz, two players that Villa will hopefully be looking to tie down to bigger deals to keep them at the club. I think it's good as well, Dan, that we're doing this a few days later as well, because the day after we recorded this, there was the rumours that Liverpool could potentially come sniffing for Ezri Konsa as a Van Dijk, Joe Gomez replacement for the season. Obviously, the other night we saw they fielded 5 central midfielders, 2 of which played at centre-half, which was certainly interesting and puts a bit of perspective on the injury crisis. But of course, the media has fully made everyone aware that Liverpool are having an injury crisis. So, I mean, now more than ever, Dan, more so than the other day when we spoke about, it's really important that we get Ezri tied down to a new contract, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really excited to run through these 3 players, mate, because I think it will really define ultimately the future of the club and where exactly this project has us going. Ezri is one that perhaps is the most important, I would say, and it's seems bizarre that he only joined last season. It feels like he's been here an age, doesn't it, mate? So reliable at the back, and those centre backs always, that when they establish that trust, like Ezri has, it feels like they've been here forever and a day. But it's easy to remember that. Sorry, easy to forget rather that he turned just 23 in October, which means for the majority of the time he's been playing for Villa, he's been 21 or 22. His contract does run until 2023, but the club have the option to extend for a further year, which is, I suppose, what we're hearing about talking, mate. And I guess we're both just going to lay down some reasons as to why extending that contract just for another year to hopefully ward off such interest for at least the near future just seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it, mate?
It absolutely does. And obviously, another thing, we were going to do a separate transfer rumor podcast talking about outgoings, but I guess we can kind of speak about them here, Dan. There has been some links on Twitter. Nothing, I've not seen them anywhere else, that Bjorn Engels is wanted by Brighton, West Brom and Derby County, which, the fact we're quite thinly spread, I'd say. A lot of people, if you'd ask them, wouldn't necessarily have a centre back necessarily at the top of their priority list, but certainly if we're going to let one go, we have to ensure that our main guys are staying. So it's really important with that news potentially coming out that Ezri is given a new contract. I think certainly based on the performances, he's certainly earned it, and it's really nice as well. And it's an aspect that I think is overlooked from outside fans, not Villa fans, but our back four's made up of entirely English players. So, you know, you're going to have your Brexiteers and you're going to love that in the comments. But it's good to see the homegrown talent that we are nurturing. And Villa have the third best defensive record in the Premier League, Dan. And it's quite funny because only one of them players is getting called up for England in Tyrone Mings. And even though he's in and around the squad, hasn't yet really been able to establish himself fully in the squad, which is quite funny. And listen, of course, there's a debate as to whether the likes of Reece James, Trent Alexander-Arnold, players like that are better than Matty Cash, and that Ben Chilwell is better than Matt Targett, of course. But you know, a bit of perspective to keep the third to be the third best defense in the league. Sorry. And only have one of your defenders called up. It just seems a bit mad to me, Dan. So I'm hoping that a call up is potentially on the cards for Ezri. But to be honest, I don't think I'll be too mad because I'm perfectly fine with him seemingly going under the radar, and which, you know, would surely ensure his future at Aston Villa for a long time, Dan.
Yeah, well, that's the big thing with Ezri, isn't it? Is that until now he's been sort of Villa's little secret in that it's Mings, because of the fact that I think when you look at the two, he stands out because of his height, his stature, his left foot, which I think is primarily one of the reasons that he gets into the England squad, is because England's lack those left-footed centre halves. But Ezri has been the one that, arguably since Project Restart, Dan, has been Villa's most consistent performer. And I'm not just talking defensively, I mean overall. He's never once been injured or suspended, which for a centre-back is pretty remarkable. That's in his whole time at the club. He started 20 consecutive games for Villa. That was until the Burnley and West Bromwich games where he missed with illness. Before that, he started 20 consecutive games. The first 6 were in a weird period at right back. We lost 4 of those games. We drew 2, conceded 9. He then makes that switch to centre-back, which seemed logical the whole time, where he's played the next 14 games. We've won 9, drawn 3, lost 5, scored 26, conceded 12.
Wow.
He's scored 3 of those goals himself in those 14 games, and that's something that's really underrated in him. He's starting to get an eye for goal, and he's coming up with some big goals.
Absolutely.
But it is those England links that sort of do worry us, Dan, because that's when Ezri gets that Mings profile. He's more in the spotlight of the general public, of other teams, more importantly. And you can see that his profile is raised, Dan, just by the agent that he's now signed with, which is Stellar Football Limited, represent the likes of Sal Niguez, Gareth Bale, Maxi Gomez, Eduardo Camavinga, Ibrahima Konate. So, you know, that reflects the rise to stardom that we've seen Ezri take. And the fact that he's been so involved in the England setup as a youth player. He won the Under-20 World Cup with the back in 2017. He's played 7 games for England's under-21s. It seems only a matter of time with his performances that he gets that England call-up. And then I think we're going to see this transfer interest really start to ramp up. So tying him down, as you said, is really essential.
Absolutely. And he's so vital to how Villa play, Dan, because obviously everybody knows that Tyrone Mings is a mobile defender, can, you know, play out from the back and that. And I think often it's Ezri's ability to play out from the back is overlooked because Ty is certainly more flamboyant. He's more experimental, let's say, with how he, you know, how he is with the ball on his feet. You know, remaining partisan here, Dan. We do love Tyrone Mings, though. But here, Dan, and this is going to surprise you, actually, the top 2 passers in terms of completed pass, like a pass completion percentage in Villa's squad this season during the 2020 and 2021 season. In fact, no, do you know what? I'm going to have you guess. Okay, Ezri's in the top 2.
Good.
I want you to guess who is where. Little game.
This is this season.
Yeah, this season. So within Ezri, he's either first or second with a pass completion rate that is extremely high. I want you to guess where he ranks and then where this other person potentially ranks.
I'm going to say a surprising. I think given the way that Villa play, it wouldn't surprise me that Ezri was top. But if he's not, the player that I would put forward is probably Douglas Luiz. But I've got a feeling it's going to be a bit of a wild card.
It's absolutely a wild card, Dan. So Ezri Konsa has the second most completed passes out of the squad. Number 1, Dan, is Marvelous Nakamba. He has an 88.2% pass
Oh,
completion rate
wow.
this season. Now, albeit I think he's only played about 1.5 games. So there is some
But still.
context to be had there. But he's got the high. So, maybe we need to put some respect on Marv's name. Douglas Luiz is actually sat third in that list with 85.2. Ezri Konsa is 86% flat out. And Marvelous Nakamba is 88.2. But what that demonstrates is just how important Ezri actually is to Villa's style of play, and how obviously we know how we like to play out from the back. Tyrone Mings is actually sat in fourth there as well with 79.3%. It's so important that the defenders are able to receive the ball, with their backs to the strikers, turn, pass the ball, carry the ball out. That's really important. Really good pass completion rate there from Ezri. And there's actually a point that I saw James Rushton tweet about, and I think he wrote about it in the Claret and Blue mailing list for Villa, is that the way that clubs now operate in terms of signing players, and we've seen this a lot with Norwich and how they do business, is once they have a player that is extremely successful, they then have a template of what to go out and scout for. Now, this is going to be the case. We're looking, I think the example James used was Douglas Luiz, and that he, of course, doesn't want to lose Douglas Luiz. So, I don't mean to misquote James Rushton at any point in this. But with the kind of player that Douglas Luiz is, we know what the stats are like. We know what the pass completion rate, the dribbles, the tackles, the take-ons are. You have the mold for that perfect number 6 for a Dean Smith side. So if he does go, it's not the end of the world. We have scouting networks set up in other places that can hopefully go out and find this player. And his point kind of led on to the fact that Villa already have the next Douglas Luiz and Ezri Konsa's lined up. And the scouts already know who they are. They've probably even been to see them play a few times, potentially even inquired about them. Of course, we don't want to lose either of them, and that's not anything that James was saying. That's not anything that I was saying either. But it's just an interesting point on how scouting and business is done, because I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily understand the intricacies of how these kind of things are done. Obviously, we've seen Norwich are probably the best at that. You've just got to look at, they had James Maddison. Sell James Maddison. Okay, that's no problem. We'll bring Todd Cantwell in. Todd Cantwell's doing well. He's probably going to be on his way out soon. They'll find another player. That's just how it works. Yeah. It's not always the end. It's not always the end of the world with these things. But of course, with that being said, Dan, it's imperative that we do get him tied down to a new contract. Again, just from a more cynical kind of outside point of view as well, just to add that kind of value onto him as well. But I think Dan as well. I mean, we've alluded to him there, but Douglas Luiz. I think the big question here is, of course, Manchester City have this buyback clause. Dan, a new contract will be looking to hopefully get that out of the negotiation, because there was actually a link a few weeks ago that Juventus were potentially interested, which would be brilliant if Manchester City couldn't come and have first dibs for the 25 million, because, of course, that's the fee that Manchester City have to pay. That's not the fee that other clubs have to pay, which is important. So if that can be removed, it will eventually, when the time comes, I said this in the last recording, which people haven't heard, Aston Villa is never going to be the be all and end all for Douglas Luiz. He's going to end up at a super club. He's going to be at a Real Madrid, a Barcelona, a Manchester City, a Bayern Munich one day, because we're genuinely looking at right now, I think it's fair to say, the best number 6 in the Premier League, but he's got the levels within him to become one of the best number 6s in world football, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I think that's very important to say, is that no boy in the barrio is sitting there looking up at the stars and one day hoping to play for Aston Villa. He bought into the Manchester City project. And I think what is, if he did leave for a Juventus, I think that would be far less painful than see him to move to another side in the Premier League. But the one thing that does scare me, there's two things really that scare me with the City things, is that there is that buyback clause rumored for about 25 million. We signed him for 15 million. So that's the kind of the progression that they expected of Douglas. I think he's by far outgrown that. I think if we sold him for 25 million, it would be painful. City have Fernandinho leaving next summer, and so I think Douglas would operate as a more mobile alternative to Rodri, because we all like to see Pep play roulette, unless you're in Fantasy Manager, of course. You never know who's going to pick in those sides. He likes to chop and change, and so having that variation in that 6 spot was something that he'd be a fan of. But for Douglas personally, He joined City from Vasco da Gama in 2017, but work permit issues meant that he never made a competitive appearance for the club, which is which leave a bit of a void for Douglas, because he was then sent on loan to Girona. His first season didn't go well. He came back after that season, really did well in pre-season. That work permit was failed again. He's then gone back to Girona, played quite well until he's moved to Villa, and the rest is history, so to speak. And so for Douglas, there is a sort of feeling that the move that never was, almost, because he never actually got so close to playing for City, impressing Pep, which is not an easy thing to do. Then it just never quite materialised, and he's made that move to Villa. City do like to operate with buyback clauses. We've seen them do it with Angelino, Dan, who they sold to PSV and then just 12 months later bought him back. That's not like a loan. That was like they sold him and repurchased him on such a contract. And perhaps most telling of all, in a recent interview with ESPN back in Brazil that Douglas did, he said that he was aware of the repurchase option. He didn't speak on it. He gave one of those typical footballer sort of non-answers, the ones down where they're like, I'm completely focused on my football at the moment. I haven't thought about any transfers. He didn't lay his cards down either way, just gave one of those typical footballing responses. But yeah, there's a few things down whereby, look, we're not the only ones aware of this. You're absolutely right that Villa will be. I think tying the likes of Jack and John down will be an important part in this process, because I think Douglas can, if he chooses to stay, can buy into that project. And then ultimately, there is the fact that whether we sign players like Ross Barkley, who we'll come on to in a minute, also play into that. So the fact that we're tying down these key players will definitely be in Douglas's mind. But you're absolutely right in saying that he signed for Manchester City, and I'm sure he wants to play for them one day.
Absolutely. There's definitely an air of unfinished business. But in terms of Villa, Dan, obviously everybody knows how good Douglas Luiz is. But again, he's like, similarly to Ezri, he's so important to the way we play. I think what we're seeing and what we have seen over the past, I'd probably say 2 years, the responsibility of a traditional number six has kind of almost flipped on its head, whereby your previous sort of enforcer type Sergio Busquets number sixes, they're not the type of players that teams are looking to play there anymore. As we know, Villa like to operate with a bit of a double pivot as well with Douglas and John McGinn, which is very important. And looking at the stats, Dan, in terms of defensive contributions, Douglas is right up there in terms of pressures onto opposition players, with 228 so far this season. Only 61 of them have been successful. But listen, when you're chasing a player, it's always going to be difficult. You're already on the back foot if you're chasing someone. But of course, that sets the tone for how Villa defend so aggressively. Another thing which is important to see as well, that is that second in that list is Ollie Watkins with 216 pressures. He's had 78 of those successful, so a better success rate. But we spoke about in previous podcasts, Stan, how Ollie Watkins really does set the tone when Villa are in the defensive phase with the pressures he applies onto the centre halves. We're seeing that from on number 6, Dan. And of course, as we've said, he operates in a bit of a double pivot. So he does have that kind of license to go forward when John McGinn is back and apply the pressure, within the midfield, sometimes within the fullbacks as well. We've seen Douglas occupy some wide positions, which is, of course, really good to see. But he's so important to how Villa play. It goes without saying how important a contract would be for this man. We've said it, we've laboured that point so many times. I think Villa fans are just demanding for Douglas Luiz to get a new contract. It is that sense of a project which I think could potentially keep Douglas Luiz at Aston Villa. As much as we love Birmingham, Dan, I'm sure he doesn't want to be in Birmingham forever. But if you can be competing in European football, whether that be Europa League, Champions League, if you can visibly show that, we want to win silverware, I think that could be something as well that he finds attractive to want to stay. And as you say, the fact that we've signed Jack and John up to contracts already, and of course Keenan Van Nistelrooy, it all just kind of shows the direction that the club wants to take in the future. And listen, if either Edens or Suarez want to get on FaceTime like they did with Jack Grealish and just explain the project, get him to sign a new contract, I'm sure we could get a bit of a translator there. That wouldn't be a problem. But, I think it'd just be really good, because I do think, Dan, we're probably, of course, we're blessed to be watching Jack Grealish right now, and he's undoubtedly the player of our lifetimes watching Aston Villa. But Douglas Luiz, has, as I say, has that potential to be one of the best sixes in the world. So, I mean, for him, for even a part of his journey, for him to have played for Aston Villa, we're going to look back at this in 20 years' time and go, wow, like that was really special. We had a special player. But it'd be great, as I say, if we could, tie him down, maybe mount a bit of a challenge, going somewhere. But of course, Dan, that leads us on to another important midfielder who isn't actually an Aston Villa player right now. You guys all know the score. Ross Barkley. He's not featured a lot. He's fairly injury prone, which is a statement that people seem to be pretty split on. He's had 3 very serious injuries down, which I know you're about to run down with me right now. Which isn't good. He's missed about 7 games for Villa as it stands right now through injury, which is, of course, not something you want to see, but could potentially be used as some leverage in bargaining a deal with Chelsea, Dan, during this window.
Yeah, I think Villa fans are now getting pretty obsessed with this injury. I saw when Villa put the starting lineup for the last game on against Man United on social media and into Instagram. I saw a fan in the comments get quite a few likes saying that Villa are purposely keeping Ross Barkley out of the team, pretending that he has a long-term injury in order to get his transfer value down. And that's one of my favourite Villa conspiracy theories. Complete nonsense, but a nice conspiracy theory. These injuries are all the way. When you talk about Ross Barkley potentially signing, this is the concern point. As you said, mate, I think there's a lot of people that don't quite know the full story, and it doesn't read too well, to be honest with you. He's currently out with a hamstring injury, and hamstring injuries are something that have hampered him at all 3 of the clubs that he's played for, forgetting like Leeds and those loan deals. I'm talking about Chelsea, Everton, and now the Villa. In 2017-18, he missed 38 games in all comps for Everton and Chelsea. He signed in January. And so that's a full Premier League season he's missed there.
Yeah.
He missed 19 games for Everton, gets that move in January, gets injured in February, a separate injury, not related to his hamstring, but is injured for another 9 games. He spent a total of 371 days injured since 2014-15, which is that's more than a whole calendar year. Yeah. But one thing I will say with all this, Dan, and it's an interesting one, is Tyrone. He was very injury prone himself at Bournemouth. He missed a total of 81 games for Bournemouth. We spent almost 2 years injured there, and as his time at Villa has been perfect. I don't think he's had many injuries, has he? If any? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Not that I can recall. No, and certainly nothing serious. Whether it just be a slight niggle somewhere, but nothing serious off the top of my head, Dan.
And so it's good that we've managed to turn that around. But one thing that I think gets looked over with Russ, and maybe it's because he hasn't played in so long, is just he's so consistent. Wherever he plays, whoever he plays for, he delivers. 55 goals and assists in 179 games at Everton, 22 in 86 for Chelsea, 12 in 33 for England. He's then come and got, I think, 2 in 6 for Villa, which is a very decent return. But the one thing I think is most important with Ross Barkley, Dan, before I throw it back to you, is the mentality that he brings. There was a feeling when he first took to the pitch against Liverpool that, like, wow, this is a big pull for him. And it felt like that when he signed, to be fair, but when you saw him on the pitch, it was like, wow, it real feel, just with Barkley on the pitch, that we've stepped up a level now, that we are a serious contender. That might have had something to do with the fact we then went and beat Liverpool 7-2. But just watching Ross on the pitch felt really good. And the fact that he's won an FA Cup, the fact that he's gone and won a Europa League, which is ultimately the kind of competitions that Villa aim to be challenging in, the fact that he's been there, done that, got the winner's medal, and then can bring that mentality to Villa, knows what it takes to finish in the top 6. For seasons like this one, where we're challenging, having a player like that in the ranks, which in a squad where it's all about depth at the moment, can't be underestimated, right?
Absolutely. And I think, the important thing, you touched on there is the mentality. There's this aura about Ross. There's this swagger in the way he plays. He knows he's good. He knows how good he is. He knows how good he can be. And he really did, he took Villa up a notch when he joined. I think it helps that we were in flying form by the time he signed, and just adding a player of his quality at that time, it can only make things better. I think we may have mentioned it in the transfer rumor mill, but I definitely mentioned it in the pod that didn't end up going out, Dan, is that the whole point of making signings at the stage now, we've built a squad, which is great. And there's certainly some players in this squad who may feel hard done by. But when you're signing players, you're going to want to be making your starting 11 players, the squad players, and the players that you're bringing in are going to be the ones, who are going to keep things competitive. And listen, we even said we couldn't even pick our best starting 11. Now, we don't know how Ross even gets in because at the moment, Anwar's on fire, Bertrand's on fire. Obviously, Bertrand scored against Manchester United, which is brilliant. A lot of players in this team right now are undroppable. Even with how good Ross Barkley has been, it's like, where does he actually fit in with Jack in the 10 position? Because that's the Barkley position. Anwar would be hard done by to be moved out of the side, and Jack back out on the left to accommodate for that. But as I said, you have to be ruthless. There are players in this squad who Ross Barkley will easily replace, and people won't like that. But someone like Conor Hourihane, if Ross Barkley signs permanently, surely someone like Nakamba and Hourihane, their days are going to be numbered. There's certainly a point for promoting the youth, and there's been a few comments actually, Dan. There was on the latest podcast about Jaden Fosu. I can never pronounce his name.
Lejeune Bedance.
That's the one.
That the guy?
Yeah, that's the guy. About introducing him into the side. RB Leipzig have been allegedly interested. There was some interest from Manchester City before we tied him down to a contract. So there's been some talk about introducing him, but just kind of looking at the timeline of when someone like Jacob Ramsey was first introduced in the side, obviously in the West Brom game in the promotion season, to now where he's made 3 appearances in the Premier League. He's played in the Carabao Cup for Villa. It's not, these players aren't going to get in straight away. So of course there's going to be, it's going to be on the back of Dean's mind. It's going to be on the back of Perslow's mind that we've got these hot prospects in the academy. But, for now, I mean, it does no harm signing Ross Barkley, even though he plays in that kind of Ramsey position, because I think Ramsey will get minutes here and there anyway. As we've kind of touched on, Dan, Ross is fairly injury prone. So it's fair to expect that he may miss another 5 games, between now and the end of the season while he's at Villa. But in terms of performance from Ross Barkley, Dan, he offers something that bit different, because we all look at Jack Grealish as the talisman for this Villa side, and rightly so. But when you're looking at the average shots per 90 minutes, despite only playing 5 games this season, I think Ross Barkley, he actually boasts, the third highest with 3.39. Again, this may come as a surprise, Dan. The 2 players who are ahead of him, Keenan Davis is first with 5.29 shots on average per 90, and Anwar Golzi with 4.67, which is great. But just to add a bit more context to that stat, because it may be a bit jarring that Keenan has more shots per 90 than Ross Barkley. Jack Grealish is actually he's significantly further down. He's about 8th in this table with 2.6 shots per 90. Maybe that just demonstrates how clinical Jack is as well, because obviously I think he scored 5 goals now this season, 8 assists, which is of course fantastic. I think he's already bettered last season's tally, which is just marvelous. But the fact that I think there was always this debate, can Grealish and Barkley play in the same side? I think we've had that debate before, Dan. We've even spoke, if Ali would fit into that in a previous Transfer Rumour podcast. But it shows that Ross Barkley, he has this role in the team. He's this risk taker. He's this maverick. He wants to score goals. He wants to have shots. He wants to create these chances. And as I say, Keenan hasn't played as much, so the stats are kind of skewed. And he must have had a lot of shots in the game that he came, the minutes he has played. But I just find that quite interesting. Obviously, he's actually higher than Ollie Watkins as well, who has 2.87 shots on average per 90, which it's all interesting stuff. But it's vital that a deal can be struck here. Chelsea are looking at potentially sacking Lampard, which may affect this. I think Lampard seems to really want Declan Rice from West Ham. Chelsea are going to have to sell players so as they can get some funds in, obviously, after spending the best part of 250 million on 2 of Germany's best players, only to play them out of position. It seems only a matter of time before Thomas Tuchel comes and takes Lampard's job. Although they're saying Shevchenko, Dan.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I'm not too sure about. Either way, there's certainly room for a deal to be struck here. Ross Barkley is the kind of signing you want to see Villa make going forward. He's not this He's not like Lingard, who is this kind of washed up player who is, probably genuinely looking for game time. But I think Ross genuinely has a point to prove, not only to himself but to everyone else, because there was so much hype about Ross Barkley. It was kind of at the same time Grealish was about to emerge on the scene. Everything was about Ross Barkley at Everton. It was brilliant. Didn't end on the best of terms there, and there's certainly this aura of unfinished business with Ross Barkley in the Premier League for England, even as well, Dan, which is another point to come on to, obviously, as the Euros are coming up in the summer. But listen, it's massive that we get this done, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's one of those whereby you saw what it meant to Jack when Ross signed. It was clearly something that he'd wanted, and I think it's the same when you talk about all three of these players. Is that with the project that Villa have, that they're currently undertaking, that wants to see them reach the top tier, that wants to see them bring these players in, that they're not going to be the stepping stone that perhaps Douglas Luiz expected them to be, that they have ambitions of their own, and that's ultimately being carried through this season. And I think you undermine that whole process if you let these players go. If you let Ross Barkley come into the team, leave at the end of the season and stay at Chelsea, you see the quality that he adds. You see what it's like when Villa make that step up and we sign players from that upper echelons. If we then just let them go, it ultimately shows a regression, not a progression. And with Douglas now, I think there's a really interesting mirror between him and Idrissa Gueye.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in playing styles, but the fact that they came in, held the base of that midfield. I mean, just to go and sort of, certainly last season, him and Douglas were operating in sort of similar quality teams in and around the relegation zone. They both shone, and now Gueye is playing in Champions League finals with Paris Saint-Germain, and that's certainly the career path that Douglas Luiz can take. I think with Konsa, it's the same when he gets that call up now that Douglas Luiz is playing for Brazil. If Ross Barkley then gets back into the England fold, you've suddenly got quite the number of international caliber players for Villa in and around the squad. And I think if you start to let them go, unless you can pick players sort of like a Leicester or Southampton mold where you can pick players in of a similar quality and get them embedded immediately, which is something clubs do very well, but it's not necessarily a sort of what's the word? A system that you can trust doing that. I mean, it's always a bit of a gamble, no matter how well you scout a player. I think Villa have to tie these players down, Dan, if they're to be the club that they want to be in the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. And I mean, Dan, that's probably a good note to end on, because the Carabao Cup semi-final starting soon. So we'll look to wrap this up within the next minute or so. But finally, as well, just to address a few comments, we've had a fair few requests for players to cover in Transfer Rumour Mill, which is really good. It's great that you guys want to hear our opinions on some of them. Someone tweeted us about Weghorst. Someone even suggested Martin Odegaard, which would be amazing, but I don't think there's been any links there. But
I'd like Lionel Messi personally.
Yeah, why not? I mean, he's free to go in the summer, Dan. I think a deal can be struck. I think he'd really love to play football with Ross Barkley at the end of the day. I think that's what it comes down to. Lionel Messi and Ross Barkley link up in that final third. We'd all love that.
You heard it first. Leave it to the Birmingham Mail.
Yeah, we're gonna see an article on that next. No, I think we'll be doing a few more transfer rumor videos. Again, we do just kind of want to wait for a few more solid links, just so as we aren't misleading you guys. But again, just to say, if we always say in these podcasts, if it's a player who we aren't linked with, that we're just giving our reasons why we'd like to sign them, why we think they'd fit. I mean, there's I think someone asked about Jordan Amavi in the comments, which I don't think we're even going to go there because there's been no links. He's out of contract in the summer. I mean, we'll talk about Amavi now. Out of contract in the summer, Dan. I don't see it happening. It's a rumor that has started from Twitter. People have started sharing highlight reels. I mean,
it's just nostalgia.
That's a no-starter.
It's nostalgia.
Yeah, that's all that is. And I mean, we were gonna we considered for like half a second speaking about Christian Eriksen. But I mean, we stooped to that level in the summer, talking about Cavani and Higuain.
We've done that.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I'd love to sit here and talk about how Christian Eriksen would fit in, I think it's safe to say he's not coming to Aston Villa. I'm sorry if that's ruined anyone's day. I just don't see it happening. But yeah, if you guys did enjoy this podcast, hit a like, comment your thoughts below in the comments. Let us know who you think is the most important player to secure down to a new contract, and how much you'd pay for Ross Barkley. I'd like to know how much people think Ross Barkley would be worth. I mean, given his contributions to the side, absolutely priceless. But we have to put a price on him. So let us know. And if you guys did enjoy and you're not subscribed, I really urge you to do so. We're growing really nicely. January and the summer are always decent for transfer content, and that's what you guys want. So there will be plenty of transfer rumor mills coming out over the next month. So subscribe. Why not, man? So yeah, if you enjoyed, like the video, comment your thoughts below and subscribe for more. Up the Villa.